The Byzantine Empire once stood seconds from total destruction. Its cities burning, armies shattered, people starving, and enemies closing in, yet what followed became the most unbelievable military comeback ever recorded. This is not legend or myth, but a real historical crisis where defeat felt permanent, hope vanished, and survival seemed impossible. Yet history suddenly turned in a shocking and unexpected direction. Most people think great comebacks happen fast, but this one began quietly, while enemies celebrated early victory and citizens prepared themselves for the end of their world. You will learn how Byzantium almost died, why Persia felt unstoppable, and how one emperor risked everything. But the truth behind this transformation will shock you deeply. This story matters because it shows how power collapses, how fear spreads, and how desperate choices can still change fate when all options appear completely exhausted. Let me show you exactly how this happened, step by step, as a broken empire rebuilt itself and struck back when no one believed it still could. At the dawn of the 7th century, the Byzantine Empire ruled vast lands. Yet years of war, plague, rebellion, and corruption had eaten away its strength. Its armies were exhausted, its treasury empty, and its people divided by riots, fear, and political violence that weakened loyalty to the imperial throne. Across the eastern border stood the Sassanid Persian Empire, wealthy, organized, confident, and reportedly commanding one of the strongest military machines on earth. When war erupted in 602 AD, Persia attacked aggressively, exploiting Byzantine chaos caused by rebellion, assassinations, and rapid leadership changes inside the empire. Province after province fell as Persian forces captured Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, cutting food supplies and shattering confidence across Byzantine society. Ancient cities burned, churches were looted, and regions renowned for centuries vanished in months, convincing many that Byzantium's time had finally ended. For ordinary people, this war meant hunger, crushing taxes, fear, and prayers whispered at night as familiar borders collapsed around their lives. Constantinople itself seemed doomed, surrounded by enemies, isolated from resources, and struggling to defend massive walls with shrinking manpower and morale. Then Emperor Heraclius took the throne, inheriting what looked like a dying empire with no clear path to survival. Sources suggest Heraclius even considered abandoning Constantinople, retreating west, and accepting that the Eastern Empire might be lost forever. But instead of surrendering, he made a decision that shocked allies and enemies alike, choosing extreme risk over slow and certain defeat. Now here's where things get really interesting, because Heraclius refused to fight the war everyone expected him to fight. Rather than defending every city, he accepted painful losses and focused on rebuilding the heart of the Byzantine army from near nothing. Church treasures were reportedly melted into coins, soldiers went unpaid, and sacrifices were demanded. Yet something unexpected began to change. Heraclius trained with his soldiers, marched beside them, ate their food, and slowly rebuilt trust destroyed by years of failure. This personal leadership restored morale, discipline, and belief, even when logic suggested the empire was already beyond saving. Then came the first major revelation, a move so bold that Persian commanders initially believed it was impossible. Instead of defending Constantinople, Heraclius led his army deep into Persian territory, far from safety, supplies, or easy retreat. This was like attacking an enemy's heart while your own body was bleeding, a strategy most generals would never dare attempt. But it worked because Persia never expected an offensive from an empire they believed already defeated. Heraclius avoided massive battles, striking supply lines, burning depots, and forcing Persian armies into exhausting chases across unfamiliar terrain. Persian soldiers grew hungry, confused, and demoralized, while Byzantine forces vanished after sudden attacks like shadows. According to historians, this constant pressure drained Persian strength faster than any single decisive battle ever could. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this, because the real turning point was still ahead. As the war dragged on, Persia itself began weakening under endless campaigns, rising costs, and growing internal political tension. Royal authority cracked as generals argued, kings were overthrown, and confidence quietly evaporated inside the Persian court. Meanwhile, Heraclius studied enemy movements obsessively, reportedly learning Persian habits, logistics, and weaknesses with relentless focus. This leads to the second major revelation, because Byzantium was no longer fighting traditionally, but reshaping how wars could actually be won. Instead of raw numbers, Heraclius relied on speed, timing, terrain, and psychological pressure to exhaust a stronger enemy. This method turned weakness into advantage, forcing Persia to react constantly while never fully regaining control. The public saw chaos, but insiders sensed something deeper, a slow collapse spreading through Persia's military command structure. Then came the moment when everything changed, the battle no one believed Byzantium could possibly win. This brings us closer to the most shocking discovery of all, the event that would completely reframe the entire story. In 627 AD, Heraclius marched boldly into the Persian heartland, forcing confrontation deep inside enemy territory. Persian forces believed victory was certain, yet something unexpected happened as the battlefield dynamics suddenly shifted. Against expectations, the Byzantine army held firm, maneuvered cleverly, and began breaking Persian morale piece by piece. This single confrontation exposed weaknesses Persia could no longer hide from its own people. Soon, whispers of failure spread, loyalty fractured, and the image of Persian invincibility began to crumble rapidly. An empire once confident now felt fear, confusion, and doubt spreading faster than any enemy army. And this is only half the story, because what followed would shock the ancient world even more. Persia soon descended into civil war, kings were overthrown one after another, and the once unstoppable Sassanid Empire began collapsing from internal chaos rather than foreign invasion. Byzantium reclaimed lost territories not through endless battles, but because its greatest enemy was imploding under political pressure and military exhaustion. An empire that had been minutes from extinction now stood victorious, stunning allies and enemies who had already written its obituary. So what does all this mean for us today, beyond ancient maps, fallen cities, and names most people barely remember anymore? It proves the greatest comebacks rarely look impressive at first and often begin when everyone assumes the story is already finished. Heraclius showed that leadership, adaptability, and timing can overcome greater wealth, larger armies, and seemingly unstoppable power. For modern viewers, the lesson is simple but powerful. Collapse does not equal defeat unless you stop adapting and moving forward. Short-term losses can hide long-term opportunity when opponents underestimate your ability to change strategy completely. But history adds one more brutal truth that most victory stories quietly ignore. Despite this legendary comeback, the Byzantine Empire emerged exhausted, wounded, and permanently weakened by years of constant war. Its economy suffered, its population declined, and its armies never fully recovered their former strength. Only a few years later, new forces rose from Arabia, reshaping the region and challenging both Byzantium and the broken Persian world. The greatest comeback in history came at a terrible cost, proving survival often leaves scars that never truly fade. Yet without this victory, European and Mediterranean history might have unfolded in a completely different direction. Empires fell, borders shifted, religion spread, and cultures transformed because Byzantium refused to accept defeat. This single comeback helped preserve ideas, traditions, and systems that still influence modern societies today. It reminds us that history is shaped not by certainty, but by those willing to act when everything seems lost. The Byzantine Empire did not win because it was strongest, but because it refused to stop fighting intelligently. That refusal changed the balance of power and altered the course of civilization itself. So when you hear stories of impossible odds, remember this ancient empire that stood at the edge and stepped forward. If this story surprised you, imagine how many other forgotten moments quietly shaped the world you live in today. History is filled with endings that never happened because someone chose risk over surrender. And that is why the Byzantine comeback still matters, not as legend, but as a warning and an inspiration. If this opened your eyes, take a moment to think about what defeat really looks like. Sometimes defeat is not losing a battle, but believing the battle is already lost. This empire survived because one leader refused to accept that belief. The most unbelievable military comeback ever was not just about war, but about mindset, courage, and timing. And that is why Byzantium almost died, then won, and changed history forever. Like, subscribe, share.